Diversity, people from all different places, different skin color, different socioeconomic status, different countries. Like, that's what I think of when I'm like, oh, I want to see diversity.
I mean, it should be as inclusive as really realistic or possible. So, like for example, Goucher is near Baltimore, which is about 50% black. So it's like, in a way, this campus sure has black people, but I wouldn't call it really diverse because it doesn't reflect the surrounding area.
So, Goucher, the institution, I do believe that they have put things in place to show non-white students or POCs that they do care about us. I don't think that it's always executed in the best way, but I do see that there is an effort from Goucher as an institution to create spaces and create resources for POCs to use on campus. And also, I affiliate anything that has to do with Goucher as being Goucher, including clubs, because you have to get those approved. And I do believe that the people at Goucher do push to create opportunities and resources for people of color to support us, because they know that we live in a society where we just need support.
Yeah, they support me. They do. Goucher's really good with that. I think the lack of diversity is not really Goucher's fault per se. It's kind of societal and structural racism. But yeah, I do think Goucher definitely supports me as a black man.
It's important to get like a different experience, because I think the class that I learned the most was from a black professor who grew up in Baltimore, and that was my favorite class because he spoke from his own experience, and that helped me to actually see like what was going on instead of just, it's just, I think it's needed.
I personally feel, as a white person who's had to do a lot of growing and a lot of learning, that it can be really powerful to have white examples. And I think that part of what has happened throughout the history of various civil rights movements, particularly around the rights of people of color, is that not only have those movements and the work of people of color been erased, but also the work of accomplices that are white have been erased, that don't give white people a place to look of what does this work look like as a white person to be done well. And so I personally, at this point in my life, feel that it is important for white students to have that space, to have a white professor to look to. I don't think that should be the only space. So in that way, I think that that's important to understand, but I think that the question also falls to what's happening outside of that class. Are students of color seeing mentors of color? Are they getting this exposure only in a race, power, and perspective class? Are they getting those experiences outside of it? So for me, I think what matters less is that particular interaction. If you have other interactions that are supporting it. If that's your only conversation about race, power, and perspective, and it's being led by a white person, that can be really difficult. But again, we should be doing lots of things outside of that as well.
One thing that needs to happen within those courses, there needs to be dialogue and discussion of white splaining, white space, domination over black students in these classroom settings, domination of the conversation about white students. Needs to be a whole bunch of discussions, but I think that's a good start. That's a good.
As a sociology major, yeah, I'd say so. But like in my classes, I don't really hear much talk about it elsewhere. But I've had great discussions about it in my courses.
My very first semester, I have encountered just like unfairness, I would say, that I personally felt was due to my race. It really made me question whether I wanted to continue being at Goucher from my first year. And I think my second semester I attempted to transfer because I just didn't understand why I wasn't being heard about my issues I would have with a particular professor at the time or not. I've been in several situations where I've had to go to administration to speak about my issues or to speak about discrimination that I was being faced with inside of the classroom, and I personally didn't feel like enough was being dealt with. Even now, it has been a year since I've had to go through a formal process of reporting and talking about my issue, and it really was never resolved. And if it was resolved, I just wasn't really in the loop of it. And this is not just a me problem, but there are several students on this campus who have done, if not the same, if not more than what I did, and they have not been heard from the administration. It's one of those many situations that are kind of swept under the rug. And I know I'm talking about this very vaguely, but it's just overall, I don't feel like Goucher handles issues of discrimination towards certain communities, I will say, in the best way possible. I think that it's a momentary thing of we care about you for this because you're a student and we want to make sure our students feel safe and protected. And then 2 weeks later, the situation is kind of swept under the rug. And unless you're persistent with trying to get updates and trying to push for change, it will literally go unnoticed, and it will be as if it never happened. And you will still see that person, you will still have feelings about the situation, and at that point it kind of makes you feel like you can't do anything about it and that you're hopeless, and that all you have to do is just continue on and get over it. And that's something that I can speak for myself, and I know a number of people have had to do the same.
I think that's unacceptable too, because like I said, I could see if we were in a place that was majority white, we were in another state that was majority white, but we're right by Baltimore, so there's no reason for there to be such a lack of black faculty or faculty of color. So yeah, it's kind of, but it's expected, because even allies are still ignorant to some extent. And Goucher is one of those few schools that is a white ally school, but everybody has their work cut out for them where they need to learn. So I'm not really surprised by it, and I'm not hurt by it. It's just more another one. We gotta fix this issue. But on the plus side, there are a lot of schools that aren't as liberal and as willing to be allies as Goucher is. So you gotta give them their props.
During my 3 years of being at Goucher, I've only had about 3 professors of color in my entire time being here. And I think that is one, just kind of crazy to have a place that promotes so much diversity and have the lack of diversity in professors and in staff, and a lack of diversity in perspective. But I also can understand why there aren't a lot of people here because of Goucher's history, and also there are a lot of factors that students don't necessarily know, a lot of factors that I don't necessarily know. And so would it be nice to see more POC faculty there? Of course it would be, but it would be wrong for me to say Goucher is being intentional about that when I really don't know all the things that are happening behind the scenes.
Sometimes it's necessary for the white person to lead the discussion, because white people listen to white people. The white students listen to the white professors more easily. I mean, I've seen it firsthand how some of the black professors don't get nearly as much respect as the white professors do off the bat. With that being said, though, I would prefer the black professor to, if they don't lead it, to at least be involved in the curriculum.
I hope that we'll do the work as a community, not to turn to just one sector, like to admissions or to CRE or to the president, and say like, hey, why haven't you fixed this situation? But to say, what is it that we all need to be doing to pull towards this, and for those offices that we feel hold a lot of power, that we hold them to task and we ask them, how do you do your work, and how could this work be done in such a way that it works the way that we hope that it will work, and that we come together with a shared vision of that, and that we're not just saying like, you fix it, I don't know how it's going to get fixed, but that we all actually invest in figuring out how this college works as a whole, as a business, and also as a nonprofit community, and a community of people who live and sleep and eat and love and fight here, but that we really recognize what it takes to pull off the goals that we want, and that we hold ourselves to that and each other.
I think that the last thing to add would be that Goucher is definitely moving further, and that we made a lot of progress. So it's easy to point out the negative things that you see, but I've also got to give Goucher props for being much more diverse and much more open to diversity in discussions than most schools. I think that's really important, because schools like Tyler, they basically have had a club that was like the KKK at one point. So, I mean, we're pretty lucky at the same time. Again, it's like we have a lot of work to do.